So again, thank everybody for coming this morning. My name is Steve Manning. I'm a thoracic surgeon here at Hopkins. Starting my 30th year here, so I'm one of the old people now. But I stayed here because of the people, and I'm sure you've met many of them here. How many people have been patients here? Okay, good. So you understand how special the people are, and I'll talk about them in a second. I remember this journey for esophageal cancer when I was a fellow back in the resident back in the 80s. Back then, it was mostly surgery. And there was my boss, Dr. Roth at MD Anderson. He had this thought about doing treatments beforehand, chemotherapy. And I was actually taking care of those patients who had chemotherapy first, followed by surgery. And it was back then, it was very experimental. Nobody actually thought that. Everybody thought it was crazy doing that. And then we added radiation. So then, as some of you know, this is now standard of care 40 years later. During that same time, I was actually doing immunotherapy research in the lab at MD Anderson. It didn't work out as well, but it's sort of funny now, 30 years later, we're using immunotherapy as part of the standard of care for esophageal cancer. So we've really evolved a lot in my lifetime, and I hope to see that it's going to continue to evolve in the next 30 to 40 years. And surgery, well, it's been pretty much the same. We've added some new techniques, minimally invasive, makes the surgery a little bit easier. Some of you know that have been through it. The minimally invasive or robotic surgery, you get to recover a lot faster. So we made some modest improvements in that. So that's been my journey through esophageal cancer. And now that, thinking about what I want to do the rest of my career, I actually just went to a wellness lecture a few weeks ago. And they say, do the things that make you happy. And so, what are those micro motivations that keep you going? Because some of you know me, I just operate. So this is one of those things, it's one of those micro motivations for me. It's just to see people who's gone through therapy, who's living their lives. We here at Hopkins, and not only with the health that you hear about, we want you to be happy, and we want you to live a long life. And that's one of the things that we want to impart upon you today. And this is the main thing about survivorship. We don't want to talk about how bad the disease is, but we want to show people, the 500 people out there in Webinarland as well, that this is a survivable cancer. What we used to think that it's old data, and we want to keep moving forward. So that's our plan for today over the next couple hours. We wanted to keep it short, as short as the esophagectomy. It should take about 4 hours. So anyway, that's why we sort of kept it this long. But I do want to thank all the people at this institution who've taken care of you, from the people like Maria at the front desk, at the front office, our office staff, phenomenal getting people in, my colleagues over in the oncology center, radiation and the medical oncology folks, the people that take care of you on the floor. Some of them are here. Deshauna, ladies in the back there, Alex and Liz, and all our fellows and residents. So it is a team sport. There's not one person that we owe everything to, but it's really the team. And that's part of the reason that I've stayed here so long, is that the team's just been phenomenal. I've gone through transitions with new people coming in every 5 to 10 years. It's been very difficult for me to lose people, but there's phenomenal people out there just to take care of them. So Hopkins is a very special place. And then finally, to thank Leslie Ritz for setting all this up. She's my other half of my brain. So I have many wives. I have like 5 wives here. So Leslie's been the driver for all of this, and really want to thank her for her efforts in getting this together. So over the next couple hours, what I really want, hopefully, to do is to show you that esophageal cancer has made vast improvements, that it is survivable. Hopefully, during the break, some of you can talk. People online, hopefully you can text us or somehow get hold of Leslie. But we do want you to mingle a little bit. I've got two great speakers today. Obviously, they're good friends of mine that I corralled to doing this today. April is Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month. Now that we're slowly getting out of the pandemic, we really want to get back to these types of in-person conferences because it's the best way to mingle. You can't really do this over Zoom. So without further ado, I'd first like to introduce our first speaker. I've known Mindy personally for over a decade now. She'll tell you a little bit about her story, how we first started. But so Mindy went to law school at the University of Maryland and practiced for a few years, and she started her advocacy back then. So she improved the quality of the Baltimore City schools. She worked as an advocate for the public safety policy in Baltimore. She enhanced the availability of drug treatment services, raising over $2 million to support the creation of the downtown community effort. Then prior to founding this organization she'll talk about, she was an award-winning TV reporter for two decades working in Baltimore for Channel 11, and as a reporter for the Maryland Public Television, where her work received several Emmy nominations. Mindy also worked in public radio for several years, selected in 1998 as Baltimore City paper's best radio talk show host, and you'll see why in a second. Well, Mindy and I crossed paths about 15 years ago, and it really inspired her to start this organization, and we really hadn't had a focus for esophageal cancer. And she'll tell you a little bit about that story. So we started this, I think, when we first, I hate to say this, but I ballroom danced, and we were thinking, and her kids danced, and we said, hey, why don't we just do a little cancer dancer thing to raise money for esophageal cancer? And that's how it first started, and she really put all her life's work and passion into this. And so where it started as a small thing at a desk in her basement, still is a little bit, but now we've had a couple offices, some of them have been waterlogged, but now we are the only voice for esophageal cancer patients on Capitol Hill, and she's a relentless conveyor of the message that reflux disease can lead to cancer. She served on a panel developing guidelines for immunotherapy with the Society of Immunotherapy for Cancer. From 2014 to 2018, she served as the patient advocate on the Esophagogastric Research Task Force of the NCI, of the National Cancer Institute. And she was very proud to represent Ecan in collaborations that led to the formation that esophageal cancer is one of the top 10 deadliest cancers, and ascertain funding for that. And on a personal note, Mindy is a tireless worker for this. She's a relentless politician in Capitol Hill. She really brings out the best of us during our monthly meetings, and I wish we could only work as hard as she does for esophageal cancer. So again, please welcome Mindy Mordecai, the President and CEO of the Esophageal Cancer Action Network. Mindy.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Before I get started on my little presentation, so I want to just let you know the thing that Steve was saying about the focus on survivorship. I think for me, whenever I meet a survivor, I feel like you are the reason we're here. We want to see the club that you're part of grow immensely. And we've seen it grow a little bit over time. I've been doing this for almost 15 years now, and I will tell you in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of reason for hope, but I will say this. In the time I've been doing this work, I feel more hopeful every day. And I'm going to share a little bit about our story and let you know where my passion for this comes from, and hopefully you can share with me some things that our organization can do to make your life better, because that's really why we're here. And I don't know if that sound is going to continue forever.
Construction, of course.
Oh, is it construction? I thought we were haunted. Okay. Well, this is the reason I'm here. My husband, Monty Mordecai, was diagnosed with stage 3 esophageal cancer in April of 2007. We had the good fortune that Steve Yang was his surgeon. He was treated here at Hopkins. At the time he was diagnosed, our kids were 8 and 11. And he had chemo during the summer of 2007, and you can see that smile on his face. My husband was the most positive person on earth. I've never met anybody more well-adjusted or happier. He underwent radiation during that summer, and then he had his esophagectomy in September of 2007. Unfortunately for us, almost immediately, they discovered that he had a metastasis. But he's still smiling, because my husband just never, ever believed that this disease was going to get him. And so he kept fighting. And I will tell you that in the times he would sit in the hallway waiting to go in for treatment after they discovered the metastasis, he'd see Dr. Yang walking down the hall. And he'd say, "Hey, Dr. Yang, thanks for giving me such a great stomach." Because he really did. He had any kind of side effects, any kind of difficulties after the surgery. He could swallow, he could eat, he was doing fine, except that he still had cancer. And eventually, we had to call hospice. Hardest thing I ever did in my life was to tell my kids that Dad wouldn't be here to watch them grow. And we laid him to rest in March of 2008. Today, 21% of patients diagnosed with esophageal cancer will survive 5 years. At the time that he passed away, that number was closer to 15. So that is progress. It's not anywhere where we want to be, but it's certainly better than it was. So Steve talked a little bit about Dance for the Cure. At the time my husband was going through his treatment, we actually were working with him to develop a plan, because my daughter, who, as Steve said, was a dancer, she really wanted to do something to fight esophageal cancer. And so she came up with the idea for a cancer dancer. And we held an event so perfectly attuned with Dr. Yang. And he gave ballroom dance lessons, because that's his thing, and he was fantastic. And we also gave a lot of other kind of dance lessons. So we had, as you can see, belly dancing, Irish dancing, African dancing, hip hop. We had just a variety of dance classes all day long, and it was a very uplifting experience. And we were able to raise some awareness. That was the whole point from my point of view, that we would have an event, the media would come, and they would tell people, if you have persistent reflux, you're at risk. Don't just take it for granted that that's okay. It's not normal. Talk to your doctor. But we realized also that we had a job to do in terms of educating some of the doctors. And over the years, we've seen many, many patients who they did tell their doctors, but the primary care docs see so many patients with heartburn, they can't send every single one of them for an upper endoscopy. And so we realized at some point that we were facing a problem that wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. At the time my husband realized that his life was coming to an end, he said, we have to do something so this doesn't happen to other people. No idea what we could do. From my point of view, to be honest with you, I was angry that I was going to lose my husband to a disease that I figured was preventable, because if everybody knew they were at risk if they had reflux, they could go get checked, and then we could keep them from getting the disease. But it's not that easy. We can't send everybody for an upper endoscopy. And I realized that sharing an awareness message in Baltimore was far from what we needed in our society, because maybe we'd help a lot of people in Baltimore, maybe we wouldn't, I don't know, but we had a whole world that needed to know this message. So we were very fortunate that we were able to take that message, heartburn can cause cancer, and develop a group of folks who were really concerned about that. I was very fortunate that Dr. Yang, my husband's oncologist, other doctors from University of Maryland and other locations were willing to join our board, help us develop a plan, and here's why we were there. We wanted to save lives. How were we going to do it? Well, first of all, we wanted to make sure that people knew that link between heartburn and cancer. But we also knew we had to do more. We needed to promote early detection. We needed to support medical research funding, because when we looked at what was out there, other cancers, they knew so much more about them than they knew about esophageal cancer. And we realized that the investment in esophageal cancer research in this country was really small, and that needed to change. And the other thing we knew needed to happen was that we needed to link families and patients to compassionate support. So that's why we were here. That's what we hoped to do. And we worked really hard on sharing that awareness message. Here's one of the...
When Daddy got sick, I didn't know that esophageal cancer was the fastest freaking cancer diagnosis in the
Sorry.
country.
Hold on. That's very, very loud. I don't know if I can fix the audio on this, because that's going to just kill your eardrums. Let's see if I can... I should have tested that beforehand. Can't even see my... All right. Sorry about that. I'm going to make it so you actually can hear it without being made to be deaf. There we go. Should we try it again?
When Daddy got sick, I didn't know that esophageal cancer was the fastest freaking cancer diagnosis in the country. When Daddy got sick, I didn't know esophageal cancer was one of the deadliest diseases there. When Daddy got sick, I didn't know that esophageal cancer could cause a heartburn and acid reflux. When Daddy got sick, I didn't know how much I would miss him when he was gone.
So that was our message. We wanted people to understand their risk. We wanted people to talk to somebody about it and get checked. How could we do it? I had no idea how you start an organization, but we did start a website, and we started to reach out to folks, and we started something called Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month. So over time, we were fortunate that other folks were willing to join us.
Governor O'Malley this week penned a proclamation making April Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month.
April is Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month.
Cancer Awareness
April
Month.
is Esophageal Cancer
April is Esophageal Cancer
April is
Awareness Month.
Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month. The formal designation for the month of April is Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month.
Once that was started by Ecan, many of the other big companies came on board. Prior to that, there wasn't.
should know the great people at Ecan. So I am involved in Ecan in honor of my brother, because my brother couldn't continue the fight. He passed away in June of 2015. So I am carrying that torch for him.
In March of 1984, I lost my dad to esophageal cancer. I certainly never dreamed it would come back and take another member of my family. This is my brother Patrick. 2 weeks after this photo was taken, Pat was diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer. Watching Pat suffer and die was the most helpless and horrible feeling, and that's why Ecan matters so much to me. Ecan's tireless efforts to educate the public is so critical to raising public awareness.
I'm going to try and adjust this audio again because it's still way too loud. But I want to ask you, how many of you folks knew that April was Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month before Dr. Yang reached out to you? Nobody? We have a big job to do. I hope you'll join us and help us spread that news because although they consider esophageal cancer a rare disease, everybody needs to know about it because folks are at risk and we need to be able to help them understand what their risk is and how to avoid it. So, no, we're not doing that again. There we go. So what did we do? We hosted events. We had the Cancer Dancer. We continued to do the dance lessons, but then we also added a gala where people could dance and have fun. We were fortunate that a former congresswoman and undersecretary of state who was also an esophageal cancer survivor joined us for the very first Cancer Dancer gala. And she pledged to work with us, and throughout her life she did. You can see Dr. Yang there dancing with his wife in her sparkly shirt. And we had a lot of fun. But we also shared a message that was important. And this particular event, you see the people running, that was in Guam. So we were able to reach folks in a lot of areas. It wasn't just here in Baltimore. It was all over the country and even all over the world. And then we worked on developing something we call our Guide for Patients, where we got doctors from around the country to join with us to develop a guide that would help patients understand the risk of esophageal cancer, what they should be looking for, and how they should approach their doctors. Because what was happening is people would go to their doctors and the doctors would say, so what, you have heartburn? It doesn't matter. They could walk in and say, well, these doctors say it does. And so it was available as a free download. And then we also, we printed it, we shared it in doctors' offices around the country. And we still have an updated guide, but we still have it available. And we host events to help people understand the message that we're trying to share. And then we even share some awareness for GERD Awareness Week, which is during the week of Thanksgiving. Then we were really fortunate because the estate of Humphrey Bogart, we reached out to them when we discovered that Humphrey Bogart had died of esophageal cancer. And we said, will you partner with us? And they said, we get a lot of requests for folks to partner with us. And, but we're going to partner with you because we feel like we can actually make a difference. And so they did. We announced our partnership, put a big, bold sign up in Times Square in New York, and set to work to start to put together a public awareness campaign. And we were very fortunate that we created this public service announcement that was had the message coming from Bogart's son, Stephen. And when they were still hosting the Humphrey Bogart Film Festivals, they showed that PSA before every single film. And we've still been able to use that message for years now, and I'll show you in a minute how we've used it in other ways. But here's what Stephen had to say. Nope. Technology's not my friend. Well, phooey. I'm really sad because this was really good. We had a lot of clips from Bogart's films, and I don't know why it's not working. Anyway, I will show you that we did, shortly after we did the first PSA with them, we were able to host the first esophageal cancer awareness evening in pro sports. And at that event, they showed Stephen Bogart sharing his message. And that was in LA with the Clippers. And we were excited about that. And we hosted other events as well. We had folks rappelling off of the Universal City Hilton. They called it Over the Edge. And then we were lucky to have Jeff Foxworthy do a benefit for us. And we'll see if this video works. Looks like it's going to work.
This is Ecan's premier event of the year. Jeff Foxworthy, No Laughing Matter. Really want to cast awareness about heartburn, that it's really nothing to laugh about, can lead to esophageal cancer. A lot of people don't know that, and we want to get that message out, and that's why we're here tonight.
I'm a fundraiser for Ecan and esophageal cancer, which really Ecan's mission is around increased awareness around esophageal cancer.
This is a wonderful event. It's a fundraising event. Jeff Foxworthy is here. We're so glad to have him. And Comcast is very proud to sponsor.
We have Jeff Foxworthy with the message that we believe is no laughing matter, that heartburn can cause cancer, but he's going to make it fun.
They don't want it to be a traditional, boring fundraiser, and no laughing matter means that it is no laughing matter, but that doesn't mean we can have some fun with it and draw people's attention in a light way, in a fun way.
You know, something like heartburn, you think, well, it's heartburn, nothing else, and you don't realize, I don't think a lot of people realize, I certainly didn't realize the significance, the repercussions from not treating it. So, if, and awareness. Awareness is what everybody needs. The more you know, then you can do what you need to do.
Getting your word out and hitting as many people as possible to get checked if they've got hiccups, if they've got coughing continually, indigestion, heartburn, whatever you want to call that. If you have that, get checked. That's the bottom line. The reason I'm a member of this group, and the message I try to convey is that it doesn't matter how bad the prognosis is, there is always hope. You don't have to feel like chemotherapy and radiation are a hard event. I breezed through it. I never lost my hair. I went to the gym. I worked. So, you know, don't believe what you read and don't believe what you hear, and keep your mind in it, and you can beat this thing. I think we're getting really close to turning the corner on some of these cancers. And so the thing you do, everybody's family is affected by cancer. If it's not esophageal, it's pancreatic. My stepdad just went through tongue cancer, and so it's everybody's family. And so just support the research for it, because one day we're going to get rid of this. Having better treatment strategies. I think even more with the awareness and also getting people to the right centers. They should find centers with high volumes and a lot of experience with this.
Talk to your friends. Talk to the people you know. Make sure that they get checked if they've got persistent heartburn or a persistent sore throat or hoarse voice or a lot of other symptoms that people don't think of as being associated with reflux disease. And they can find out anything they want to know on our website at www.ecan.org. We have a free guide that they can download. Lots of information. There's no reason to be uninformed.
Eating a deep fried bacon wrapped chili dog for breakfast, you might be a redneck. But if you have heartburn or acid reflux on a regular basis and never tell your doctor, you might be risking your life. Reflux disease is no laughing matter. Heartburn can cause cancer. Get checked.
So you can see we did what we could to get that message out, to help people understand that they were at risk, using the media, using events, using all the things that we felt were at our fingertips. But we also figured there was another thing we ought to be able to use, and that is the government. And so we petitioned the FDA, asking them to put a warning label on over-the-counter reflux medication. We felt like the people who really needed to hear this message were the ones who were buying this stuff and taking them like their candy and living on them and knowing that they weren't going to make it through the day if they didn't have it. We filed our petition. We actually did a public opinion poll to find out how many people knew that reflux could lead to cancer. And I'm curious, how many of you think maybe half of the public knew that it was 50%? Nope. 25%? Yeah? The number was 14%. Only 14% were aware. And I will tell you that when we asked them flat out, do you think reflux disease can cause cancer? 60% of them said no. So the job we have to do is huge, but it's not just the job with the public. It was also a job with some doctors. The saddest call I ever got was from a young woman who was a physician whose father had just been diagnosed. And she said, we didn't even know. And how is that possible? That a physician wouldn't know. So the job is big, but we're still working on it. And we used this opportunity, even though I will tell you that the FDA didn't grant our petition. They did give us a good roadmap on how we could be successful next time around, what kind of proof we would need to be able to do it. But we were able to take this opportunity to raise more awareness and share a message that was useful for folks.
Heartburn was simply a way for David Johnson every night to lie down, go to sleep, to feel that familiar burning sensation in his chest, but didn't realize that chronic heartburn could raise his risk of a much more serious problem, cancer. Fox Medical Team's Beth Gavin has this story. Johnson had chronic acid reflux, so the stomach from his acid was constantly splashing up into his esophagus when he'd lie down at night. Over time, that acid had caused some pre-cancerous changes in the cells that line his esophagus, and that's why Johnson is telling his story, to warn people not to ignore heartburn like he did for years. David Johnson never spent much time waiting to see a doctor until a few years ago. But he did grow up with a really common health problem that stretches back decades, all the way to childhood: acid reflux.
I didn't want to be a kid, wake up in the middle of the night, have to sit up because the heartburn was just too aggressive, too hard. And then as an adult, it was all the time when I had to keep a Rolaids in my pocket.
Johnson got by on a cocktail of over-the-counter antacids that would temporarily relieve that burning feeling, but then his symptoms would come back. In his mid-30s, he finally went to the doctor and was diagnosed with Barrett's esophagus, a serious complication of gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, that left untreated could raise his risk of esophageal cancer. Dr. Mark Frisch, Johnson's gastroenterologist here in Atlanta, says many people are self-medicating their acid reflux, unaware it could be raising their cancer risk too.
There are definitely people who have waited too long, and that's an unfortunate scenario. But we would like to find them soon, just like with many diseases.
Often over-the-counter reflux medications do carry labels advising consumers to see a doctor if their symptoms last more than 2 weeks. But Dr. Frisch says many patients are self-medicating unaware that there is a link between long-term acid reflux and esophageal cancer.
And I think a lot of that is, again, because there isn't enough awareness out there, and people don't understand necessarily the link, and that's why we're here today to try to raise awareness.
Trying to get the message out, a group known as the Esophageal Cancer Action Network is planning to petition the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, asking the agency to require labels on over-the-counter reflux medications warning of the cancer risk posed by reflux.
and explaining that taking a medication doesn't eliminate that risk. David Johnson says he had no idea.
You just figured that heartburn, it just goes away and you're fine handy dandy, but actually you're causing damage the whole time.
All right, you can go ahead and move back up on me.
After a GI scope found some precancerous cells, Johnson's now going through a series of ablation treatments and getting regular checkups. And he has a message for the many people out there who are trying to treat their own heartburn.
If you take Rolaids or over-the-counter meds, more than 2 times a week, or have something in your pocket or bedstand, really that's an indication that you need to go see a doctor.
Dr. Firth says the overall risk of developing esophageal cancer is low, but it is there. So if you have heartburn that lasts more than a couple of weeks and it's not getting better even with medication, go see your doctor. For the Fox Medical Team, I'm Beth Galvin. Coming up.
So raising awareness was my first goal. But what you realize once you start to learn what's going on around you is that awareness isn't going to be enough. And we knew that we needed more and better medical research. And interestingly, at the time we first started Ecan, the National Cancer Institute was starting a new project called the Cancer Genome Atlas, or they called it the TCGA. And they had a list of 20 cancers, and they were going to map the genome of those 20 cancers. And at the time, esophageal adenocarcinoma was the fastest increasing cancer in the country. But we were not on their list. And so I went to Washington and I said, why? Why are we not on your list? How can we not be on your list? And there were lots of, well, we can't get the tissue samples. And, we don't have the money. And so there was a group of folks, including Dr. Yang, who had a very long and introspective discussion about what should we do about this. And our board of directors wrote a letter to the director of the National Cancer Institute and said, look, we'll get you your tissue samples. We'll raise that $500,000 you say you need to start this. But please put us on your list. Because truthfully, my view was that if we weren't part of the TCGA, that train was going to be leaving the station and we were going to be sitting right there on the platform just watching the world pass us by one more time. And that wasn't okay. And so I can tell you, one of the happiest memories I have about the work I've done here is the call I got from a researcher you're going to see in this next video who called me to say, Mindy, you're going to get a call inviting you to work on the disease working group of the esophageal cancer project of TCGA. And I'm jumping up and down, and I said, when do we have to start raising the money? And he said, I don't think you do. And I said, why? He said, well, now I'm going to tell you guys, Ecan at that point, I was working full-time for free, and we had $40,000 in the bank, right? He said, I think you shamed them into finding it in their budget. I don't care what it was that made them do it, just glad that they did.
Definitely put a lot of pressure on the National Cancer Institute to develop a project in esophageal cancer. They're extremely valuable because it is an unprecedented roadmap to what is broken in these cancers, and it gives us a new way to think about these cancers, especially the similarity of esophageal and gastric cancer. So it's it's a roadmap, but it's not a finish line. So I think now it's something for us to build off of, but we have much more ability to effectively build and move forward now than we did several years ago.
You may or may not know that maybe a third of esophageal cancer patients will respond to the immunotherapies that are available now, and they were developed for other kinds of cancer. We've never really had researchers who could focus specifically on esophageal cancer. We've had very little funding from the federal government for esophageal cancer research, and so we decided we needed to do something about that. I'd been banging on the NCI for many, many years, and they'd pat me on the head and say, oh, well, when we make progress in other cancers, your patients will benefit. And I said, that's not good enough. And so we discovered that there was another cancer research fund apart from NCI, and we decided that we needed to be part of it. And so we launched a campaign to do just that. There we go.
Nobody is promised tomorrow, but my path is more uncertain than most. As a wife and mother of 3 young kids, I was devastated when 5 years ago, at age 43, doctors told me to get my affairs in order. They said I had stage 4 esophageal cancer, and they gave me little reason to believe a long life stretched before me. But I was determined, and I got lucky, not just once, but twice. First, I found a medical team that believed I could beat the odds, and they helped me to do it. Chemo radiation to shrink my tumor, and then surgery to remove my esophagus, a procedure rarely available to stage 4 patients. And when my cancer came back 2 years later, an experimental immunotherapy has not only kept me alive for the past 3 years, but has allowed me to thrive. As a wife, mother, valued employee, and a patient advocate. But for my life to continue down this hopeful path, I will likely need another medical breakthrough, and I'm concerned about that. Because even though esophageal cancer is responsible for 2.6% of all U.S. cancer deaths, it only receives 0.5% of the federal cancer research budget. So I'm taking action, and you can too. With Ecan Help, you and I can set in motion a drive to have esophageal cancer included in a multi-million-dollar cancer research fund, the only one controlled by Congress. To do that, we must raise $50,000. That's what we need to wage a powerful campaign so that lawmakers will finally hear the voices of folks like you and me in Washington. The result will be many millions of dollars for esophageal cancer research funding every year going forward. Think about that. Your gift of $500 or $50 could result in $5 million or more in esophageal cancer research funding, not just for 1 year, but for each and every year for many years to come. Enough to fuel innovation that could save my life and the lives of so many others. Our secure online donation form only takes a couple of minutes, but the power of your gift will last for years to come. And so will the gratitude you'll have from me and so many others like me that need a fighting chance that just doesn't exist today for most esophageal cancer patients. In that way, I guess this really is a chance for you to promise somebody tomorrow. I hope you'll take it.
I want to just say that the woman you see there, Dana Dayton, she's a member of our board of directors. She's still going strong. She's doing great. And I love to tell that story because there is hope, even with a stage 4 diagnosis. So what the fund was this multi-million-dollar cancer research program that came out of the Department of Defense, and Congress would appropriate hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and we weren't part of it. And so the first year we tried, we were able to raise that $50,000 and launch a campaign. And so for 3 years now, our researchers have been able to apply, and so far, nearly $14 million in new esophageal cancer research has been funded through this program. And it's going to be funded next year too, and we hope it will be funded for many years to come. And some of the research that they're doing is really exciting, not only on the prevention end, but on the treatment end, and on how and on how you make life better for survivors. They even have funding for that kind of work as well. So it's important. We are grateful for the opportunity to have done it, And I hope that if you can take a few minutes to go to our website, you can send a message to your members of Congress to let them know that this matters to you. Your personal story really does have an impact with them. And I can tell you, we used to go to Capitol Hill, and then we had to do everything virtually. We're going back next year. Anybody who wants to join us, you're welcome to come. I have seen tears in the eyes of those staffers who've heard our stories. They can care when they hear it. If they don't hear it, you're just not on their radar. And we just are working really hard to make sure we stay on their radar. If you want to ask Steve about his experience, he joins us, and I'm very grateful for that, because hearing the patients is one thing, but hearing the doctors and the importance of that research funding, we're doing it together to make a really solid case, and we're grateful for that. So I'm here to say there are many ways that you can get involved. As I said, you can become an advocate, you can go down to DC with us, or you can just go online and send a little message. You can become a mentor. We're trying to start a program to mentor patients and caregivers, but we need to recruit folks who've been through that experience who are willing to share with others. You can share an awareness message. It's Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month. You can host an event. If you have a workplace, set up a table, share some information. We'll send you all the pamphlets you want. We even have now lawn signs and floodlights. So you can put a sign in your front yard that tells people that heartburn can cause cancer, and you could be crazy like me and make your whole house periwinkle every night so that people go, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? That's not the Ravens' colors." So, or the O's. And then, to me, the most powerful thing you can do is tell people your story, face to face. That's where the impact happens. You can hear an ad, you can even read an article, but nothing has more impact on folks than hearing from people they actually know. So we started Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month because we wanted to raise awareness. Everybody has the power to do that a little bit or a lot. We have our awareness bracelets that we put out up front. Take as many as you like, share them with the people you know. And if you're so inclined, we're trying to start something new. Friday, April 21st will be Periwinkle Power Day. Wear your periwinkle blue. Show the world that you're fighting this cancer. And I just want to thank you all for listening to me. And I'm hoping that you'll think a little bit about maybe going to our website, sending us a message about how we might be able to better serve your needs, because that's the only way we're going to be able to grow our agenda in a way that's really useful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mandy.
Thank you, Mandy. As you can see, Mandy breathes, eats, sleeps this day and night, and I think, in my opinion, she's probably the most powerful advocate for esophageal cancer in the world. If you want to, we have a few minutes for questions. Any questions out here from you all? Oh, sorry.
I noticed that most of the patients or survivors are men. Is esophageal cancer more prevalent in men?
Yes, 3 times more likely for men to get diagnosed with esophageal cancer than women. But as you saw, we have women too. Dana Dayton is a good example of that. And actually, we've seen some numbers about, the survival rates are slightly better for women, it seems. But, I've never seen, and Steve, maybe you have, but I have not seen any definitive research that explains why this cancer is more prevalent in men.
That was going to be my next.
Yeah, everyone asks. and one day, a few years ago, I saw something about testosterone and its involvement in GERD. But beyond that, and I don't know how much of an impact that really has, because esophageal cancer, the squamous cell esophageal cancer, is also more prevalent in men, and that has nothing to do with GERD. So,
yeah, I mean, it's when I first started, it was 10-1 men to female, and we've seen the slow shift to 3-1. So it definitely is increasing in women. We don't know why. We did look at it, estrogen, progesterone, some of the hormones that we see with women, but that really had no effect. Here in the U.S., I think the only thing that's common is obesity, eating bad, poor eating habits, usual things. So here,
Yeah, but you know my husband, He was like, he exercised every day, he didn't eat sugar, he ate a low-fat diet. When I was pregnant, I joked, you should have those babies because I'm not in the kind of shape you're in. And, it didn't matter. He's still, and we see that too, right? It's like no rhyme or reason. The thing, though, that's very sad, and we see it in colorectal cancer too, is that we're seeing more and more young people. And the most heartbreaking case I've seen was a 16-year-old diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer.
So you're seeing it more below 50?
Oh, yeah. They've done the research on patients 50 and under, and it's tripled over the last, or doubled over the last 3 decades. Sorry. Yeah. And so one of the things we're trying to put together is a group that's going to start looking at, you saw that story with the gentleman from Atlanta who had reflux as a kid?
Yeah.
Which we're going to try and get some pediatric gastroenterologists involved so that maybe we can figure out a way to identify those kids who are at risk. Because when you think about being that mother, when that boy at 16, when he became legally an adult, he said, this is no life, I don't want any more treatment, and she had to watch her son die. I can't even imagine what that is like. But I feel like we should do better. We should figure out a way so that people don't have to go through that. Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
It begs to be said when you have Humphrey Bogart as a spokesperson that cigarettes and alcohol, which I read, and it's probably dated, that it was a major factor in the development of this. And you all not mentioned that whatsoever.
So, there are 2 types of esophageal cancer. Esophageal squamous carcinoma is the type of esophageal cancer that Humphrey Bogart had, and the type of esophageal cancer that's most prevalent in the other parts of the world, and that is generally linked to smoking and drinking. The type of esophageal cancer that's most prevalent in the United States and other Western nations is caused by acid reflux. And so, I'll be frank with you, if smoking was the primary cause, I don't think I would have given up my career to start an organization, because there are a lot of folks out there who do a much better job of telling people not to smoke than I ever could. But I just felt like no one was telling people that reflux is a cause. So we do share that information, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so sad you couldn't see the Bogart PSA, because one of the things you see is you see Humphrey Bogart punching people out, and Steven says, in the golden age of Hollywood, no one was tougher than my dad, but even my dad couldn't beat esophageal cancer. And then you see a shot of Bogey smoking. There's the smoke's coming up, and Steven says, most people think esophageal cancer is caused by smoking and drinking, but those people are wrong. The kind that's most prevalent in the United States today is caused by acid reflux. So we don't ignore it, and if you go to our website, you'll see the information about it, but for me, the impetus is that everybody thinks heartburn's benign. I mean, I think a lot of you are probably as old as I am and remember those commercials that Alka-Seltzer used to do. I can't believe I ate the whole thing, and it was all just a big joke, right? It's not a joke. And we needed to make people aware of that, and that's why we were here. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Out of curiosity, heartburn and indigestion are ubiquitous. And it would seem that a relatively small percentage of esophageal cancer. And I would think just the numbers that you're dealing with make it.
So one of the reasons...
And treatment issue.
Right, and so when upper endoscopy is your only tool, you're in trouble because it's expensive and it's not without risk. Now we have minimally invasive devices. They haven't yet been approved by insurance, but we're getting close to that you can swallow, and they can do a DNA test to see if you are at risk, and they're relatively inexpensive. And I will tell you, for me, one of the happy days this year for me was I get to be a grant reviewer for those federal grants that we worked so hard to get access to. And there's a researcher up in Massachusetts who has put together a little capsule you can swallow that will go, you can swallow it, and it will go in and not only take a picture of the surface of your esophagus, but do a cross-section of it too. So you see everything that's there, and you get an immediate response because they've developed the AI to know whether you're at risk for Barrett's or cancer. And he's developed this test to the point where it's going to cost like $200. So their goal is to have this in the primary care offices. If that happens, huzzah. That could be a real game changer in terms of preventing other people from getting this disease. We're not there yet, but at least there are things in the pipeline now, and that's why this research funding was so important to us, because before there really wasn't that much support for that innovation or even a focus on doing it. So now we at least have some funds, and there's a growing group of researchers who are worried about not just the prevention end. I want to just tell you, they're working on the other end as well, finding those targets for those who've already been diagnosed, finding new therapies, finding new approaches to therapy. And another piece of what we try to do is make sure, so we do webinars to try to help patients understand more about their disease and what they can do. And they developed actually here in Baltimore something called cryoablation, where they could kind of freeze dry your tumor. But it was originally developed to treat Barrett's, and they would freeze the Barrett's tissue. But they discovered that they could use that spray cryotherapy on tumors. So for patients who couldn't swallow, they no longer have to have a stent or a feeding tube even necessarily, because you could eliminate that tumor and they'd be able to eat. And I used to think, if my husband could have not had that feeding tube, which was the bane of my existence, I can tell you, what a difference that would have made in all of our lives. But no patient's going to survive treatment without nutrition. And so the thing that is kind of concerning to me is that we've been talking about this for a while, but when I share this information with patients and they go to their doctors, a lot of the doctors don't know what you're talking about. So finding that intersection where innovation gets to the patients and to the doctors who are treating them, and esophageal cancer is relatively rare. So you need to go, as Steve said in that interview, they need to be going to the places where people know how to treat it. And one of the things Ecan is working on, our board has come up with the plan to develop certification for centers of excellence so that patients have an idea of where the best places to go, as opposed to, well, there's a hospital down the street and it's convenient and I'm going to go there, because that's probably not the best place to get your treatment unless you live, down the street here. So, yeah.
What are the symptoms of heartburn?
So here's the thing. It's not just heartburn. Reflux, like my husband didn't have heartburn. My husband would lie down at night and choke.
So then why do you use the term heartburn?
Because most people, when we started, if you said reflux to people, they didn't know what you were talking about. So we use heartburn as shorthand, but we also make a big effort to let people know, and you saw in my interview, if you have a persistent sore throat, hoarse voice, cough, tooth erosion. I come from a family of dentists, and some of my best friends are hygienists, and they tell their patients who they see have tooth erosion, they'll say, you have reflux. And patients will often say, I don't have heartburn. And they'd say, no, well, you may not feel it, but you definitely have it because it's burning the enamel on your teeth. And I've got a friend who I went to grade school with who saved one of her patients' lives. She bugged him until he finally went to see a GI doc, and he had Barrett's, and he had dysplasia, and they were able to treat it.
Is persistent throat clearing?
That's one of the symptoms, too. Some people have hiccups, and by the time you have hiccups and stuff, though, you probably already have cancer. But yeah. And the other thing, my personal story, I was a television reporter, and I lost my voice many years before my husband was diagnosed. And I went to an ENT, and he put a thing down my nose. He said, "You have heartburn?" I said, "No." He said, "I'm not asking you, I'm telling you." And I said, "I don't have heartburn." And he said, "Well, the reason you can't talk is because the acid from your stomach has burned your vocal cords." And I was like, and this is when PPIs were still only by prescription. And he gave me a prescription, and he said, "You're going to fill this prescription, your voice is going to come back." And I will tell you, I walked out of there holding that script in my hand, like kind of 50-50 on whether I was going to fill it, because I thought, this guy must be a quack. How is that possible? But I did get it filled because I didn't really have a choice. If I couldn't talk, I couldn't work. And my voice did come back. So there's silent reflux. And about 40% of Barrett's patients have no symptoms that they ever were able to identify, which is why we keep trying to educate people. You know, they diagnosed President Obama several years ago with reflux because he had a sore throat that lasted for 6 weeks. Most of us, if we have a sore throat that lasts 6 weeks, the doctor isn't going to be that worried about it. But when you're the president, they do pay attention. And so, it was, to me, that was an object lesson for people to understand that the thing that you think is nothing or something different.
So we'll go ahead and get started with our next speaker. Very proud to have Mr. Ware. So he spent 35 years with the Mars Incorporated company. They're pretty famous for making a lot of this, Snickers and M&Ms, and but they're also the world's largest pet food company. So we know him as the Candy Man, and also the guy who's not good for our diets. So he's keen to point out that the products are not made in the same factories. So after a few years working in the nuclear industry, Mr. Ware joined Mars in the UK in 1988, and since then he's lived in 6 countries and worked in other countries, serving a variety of positions in the supply chain, R&D, and procurement across all of the Mars business segments. For the last 17 years, he's been based at the company's headquarters in McLean. He's proud to have a dual national citizenship, both the UK and the passports, which makes it easier, he told me, to go back and forth. He can cut through all of the security lines. Probably paying him off with the candy bars and stuff. So Mr. Ware will talk about his journey. He is now 6 years out, so he's from his cancer diagnosis and considers himself a survivor, as we do. He's recently retired, which is sort of odd since you're younger than I am. And I was looking forward to spending more time with his Swedish wife, Helena, and their 3 wonderful children. He expects to have much more of an opportunity and to indulge in his 2 passions, hopelessly rooting for disappointing sports teams, maybe like the Ravens. Depends upon who's going to be quarterback next year. And owning slow racehorses. He's fascinated by the world at large and loves to travel. He loves to talk, as you will find out shortly. So I guess it didn't affect his talking or his breathing. So again, Richard, thank you very much for coming. You've been just a wonderful patient to deal with, not because of the Mars and candy that you're bringing us, but you've been a delight to the whole team. You're sort of a man of the world, and we really appreciate everything that you've done for us and for us today. So thank you. Welcome, Mr. Ware.
Did you write that yourself, Steve? Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Actually, I'm delighted to be a survivor 6 years out. I had my last scan in March, which is good, and actually avoided the embarrassing situation where I wouldn't have been able to turn up as a survivor because I hadn't survived. So I'm still here. That's great. So thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to, as I say, I have a tendency to talk a lot. So I'll tell you my story. I'll tell you some of the things I've learned along the way, which I'll share with you. But then I'm also interested in hearing from you what your stories are. And I hope that I'll say some things where you say, yeah, me too. And I might say some things where you say, no, that never happened to me. But I think, a lot of what we heard this morning really resonates, because I thought I was a pretty healthy 56-year-old male, bit overweight, went for my medical, and they said the usual things: hypertension, lose a bit of weight, watch your diet, and so on. And almost on the way out of the room, they said, is there anything else? See, I'm just having a bit of difficulty swallowing. Because I'd missed all that heartburn and reflux stuff, but I did notice that food was kind of getting stuck. So I said, what's that? And that's probably nothing, is it? It starts getting on. They said, well, you should probably get that checked out. Next time you go and see, you get your colonoscopy done, get them to do an endoscopy as well. I kind of assumed that would take place at the same time, but that's not how they do it these days. But I went to see my GI doctor, and he said, we're doing an endoscopy. And he actually called me when I was on vacation and said, can I see you? And I said, sure, but I'm in Newport, Rhode Island. He said, well, when are you back? So I arranged to see him on the day I got back from vacation, and the doctor is standing waiting for me. And he says, you've got cancer. And so the first thing he says, no, not me, but I haven't got cancer, it's someone else. But yeah, that was the diagnosis, and this was August 2017. And the first 24 hours are tough, particularly as I did the thing that you should not do, which I'm sure you all did. I came home and Googled esophageal cancer, and I saw the 5-year survival rate at the time was 18%. And I thought, well, that ain't good. And then, so that first night, you start thinking about all the things you're going to miss. Grandchildren, walking my daughter down the aisle to get married, that kind of stuff. And, I was almost like paralyzed by wondering what to do and how was I going to tell my wife? And I just blurted it out. I said, I've got cancer. Are we going to tell the kids yes or no? The answer is yes. Who are we going to tell and how are we going to tell them? The hardest thing for me was telling my 80-year-old parents that there was a 82% chance that they were going to outlive me. And that was the hardest part of my journey. But my wife was an absolute rock. Helena said, we'll get through this, we'll find a way. Step by step, day by day, we'll get through it. And I consider myself to be extraordinarily fortunate to have come to Hopkins and seen these guys. Because it was all about moving from, this is a death sentence, to, we have a plan. And I met Dr. Yang, I met Dr. Kelly, I met Dr. Vong, I met Dr. Hayes, and so on. And I just felt an enormous sense of security, because this was a team that said, here's what we've got, here's how we're going to deal with it. We have a plan. And the good news, bad news was, they said, you shouldn't be getting this at 56. And you should, and again, we talked about, if you have lung cancer, it's probably because you smoked. With esophageal cancer, I think people didn't really know why I was getting this. I said to the doctors, is it lifestyle? Is it diet? Is it hypertension? Is it alcohol? Is it smoking? I didn't smoke. Is it all of the above? None of the above. And they said, they don't know. We just don't know, which is one of the reasons why I think it's hard to get the funding for esophageal cancer, because there isn't a causal link to something. But that's why it's so important to do what we do, I think. Anyway, I saw, one of the things they say, here's what we're going to do, because you're able to deal, because we think, we can treat you, here's what we plan to do. We're going to put you on immunotherapy, then radiation, then chemo, then surgery, and then we'll see if we need to do something else after that. And the irony of this is my wife lost her mother to esophageal cancer. And in the case of her mother, my mother-in-law, they basically couldn't do any treatment. She wasn't the immunotherapy wasn't appropriate or wasn't around at the time. They thought she wouldn't be able to tolerate radiation and chemo. She certainly wouldn't be able to tolerate surgery. So my wife watched her mother die in front of her over a period of years. And then cancer comes back for her husband. So I think, this esophageal cancer clearly doesn't like my wife very much. But then I saw Yang, and he said, well, here's what we're going to do. He said, we're going to we do all this stuff, and then we're going to open you up here, deflate a lung, do this here. You'll have a feeding tube, you'll have a chest drain, you'll have something through your nose to hold a tube in place. Piece of cake, he says, I do these all the time, no problem. And I thought, he's my kind of guy. This is, I could not be more lucky to be being treated by these guys, because clearly they know their stuff. And I think, so one of the things I learned along the way is, if you can trust your medical team, trust these guys, because these guys are the best in the world. Anyway, so I had the surgery, and it was pretty grim actually. Those first few days in hospital, they were pretty bad. The drugs are fantastic, by the way, but you know, it was like I was looking down and there were 9 different holes in me, and I'm thinking this is like, you know, the return on the investment of this clearly can't be very high, because it must have cost them a lot of time to do all this, and also because I'd left it too long, so mine had turned into stage 3 cancer, and I'd got something up here on the vocal cord. So in addressing the vocal cord, I actually lost my voice. I couldn't speak. And then when my voice came back, it was this weird English accent. I don't know where that came from, but you know, it's like. But anyway, I think so. So I eventually sort of. So when I was in hospital, they sort of said, "Oh, that was the other thing." I said, because on the immunotherapy, they said, actually, this is a great trial. It's a brand new trial. We've done it on lung cancer before. We're trying it on esophageal cancer. You're patient number 1. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool. I'm getting myself a tattoo, patient number 1. Until when I was getting ready for my radiation, they tattooed this little dot on you. And that hurt so much, I thought, there's no way I'm getting a tattoo. A tattoo. I couldn't stand the pain of this stuff. So anyway, one of the things that, I can remember my wife saying, hit him with everything that you've got. Immuno, radiation, chemo, surgery, then more radiation and more chemo if you need to. Hit him hard. Can you dial up the dose a bit? You know, just make sure he suffers a bit. And I was thinking, well, that's charming. But she was so determined that we were going to fight this, that in her mind, and therefore in my mind as well, failure was just not an option. We were going to do this. We were going to just take every day, day by day. So when I remember one of the things in hospital was, again, she sort of said, you've got to take control of this. So one of the things they wanted me to do was get up and walk around, you know, when you're in that ward and you can sort of walk around the 4 squares. And they said, Helena said to me, you need to do 20 laps a day. And I'm thinking, I can hardly walk, actually, and I've got the food in tubes on here, and I can't. But she said 20 laps a day. So I started timing myself and trying to set a personal best of doing my 20 laps a day. And I was like elbowing the other patients out of the way if they were getting in the way, this kind of stuff. But I think it was about taking control. It was about not being a spectator on this journey. It was about, you know, standing toe-to-toe with this guy and you know, just pushing and wanting to just take control. Anyway, I came out and I had more chemo, which was this Folfox. That's a doozy, right? That's a good one, isn't it? With the port. The guy put the port in, and you know, I carried my little handbag around at weekends, which was a great look. But then, you know, the scans were all good. They said, this is great. You know, the scans are looking good. But I could tell Dr. Vong, she wasn't happy, because she said there's this thing up here that just lights up every time, and it grows a bit, and you know, it lights up like a little Christmas tree up here. And this was in an area of prime real estate, you know, just around the esophagus, in front of the trachea, right next to the aorta. So they said, he said, I talked to the tumour board about this, and they say, well, you know, is it cancer or not? It could be scar tissue. So I lost count of the number of biopsies I had. Steve Yang went in with his special robot machine to see if we could find a sample of cancer, and we never could. But Vong said, you know, I'm not happy with this. So we're in now February 2021, and she says, I want to do something about this because it's just growing and this thing is wrapping itself around your esophagus. How are you feeling? I said, I feel great. She said, perfect time to do something. Let's go in and go again. And I think, you know, and she said, and by the way, I'm bored of, you know, talking about you every time we have a tumour board meeting. Every Wednesday we talk about you, Richard. And I said, well, I think that's pretty good. That's pretty cool, isn't it? It's nice to be talked about. But she said, I want to go in. And she was also very good at sort of saying, but this is not without risk, because we've got to thread the needle in terms of the radiation. Because what can happen is we can put a hole in your esophagus. We can perforate your esophagus. And people don't do well when you have your esophagus perforated. You know, food is supposed to go down a particular tube, and it doesn't do well when it ends up in other parts of the body. I said, what's the alternative? She said, there isn't any. You know, she said, eventually this thing will sort of close off your esophagus. So now is the time to do it. I said, but she said, there is a risk. I said, well, if it's like 10% risk, I'm okay with that. She said, well, it's like a coin toss. 50% chance of putting a hole in the esophagus. But, you know, we said, we've got to do this, let's go in again. But again, back to trusting your medics. I could tell on the third day of radiation that she was happy. She said, you're lining up beautifully. I'm hitting this thing exactly where I want to. And so we did the radiation. We did my third round of chemo, which ended in the middle of 2021. And 2 years later, the scans are great. So, you know, I'm still hanging in there. I wanted to, I want to leave plenty of time for sort of for discussion if we can. I would say, you know, the single most painful thing I actually had was because there was some stuff on the vocal cord. They actually had a Botox injection in one of the vocal cords. So here I am, I'm like 60 and I've had a tattoo and Botox, right? So, and it was the single most painful thing imaginable because I've got this terrible gag reflex. So first of all, they try and stab me through the outside to get the Botox in, and then they're sticking things down my throat. And I said, I just never want to do this, you know, this. Put me out if you're going to do this Botox stuff again. When we had the, you know, the sort of the pessimistic, it was a pretty pessimistic outcome. I took it quite pessimistically, really, you know, when I went in for the second round of treatment. I remember one of the most empowering things we did was we kind of made a plan B, my wife and I. The plan A is that you survive. Plan A is that you'll come through this, but what's the plan B? And we did some little things in terms of, you know, I've still got it. I wrote down, because, you know, my wife has no interest in sort of paying the bills. She's good at spending the money, but she's not interested in paying the bills. You know, who do we pay and how do we pay them? How do we sort of run our affairs? So I wrote all that down, so at least somebody can go and look at it, you know. And where are you going to live if I don't survive this? And it sounds a bit sort of dark, but it was really empowering to sort of say, you know, here's plan A, we'll be all right. Plan B is at least it exists. So one of the things I kind of learned is, you know, fight for everything you've got for plan A and have a plan B. So what does that I want to say? I mean, you know, I say to people, I'm a big sharer. I can't keep anything to myself. Don't tell me a secret because I'll tell the whole world, right? But I just found myself wanting to tell people about my journey. So I wrote a note to people at work and I sort of said, here's what I've got. Here's what's happening. It's not a sensitive subject. If you want to know anything about it, just ask me. And, you know, I found that quite cathartic because, you know, in return for, you know, I don't know whether it was an overshare or just telling people personally what was going on, I just got such a huge amount of support and love back, you know. And I think this journey takes you to some pretty dark places, but I never for a minute felt I was there on my own. You know, when you're walking through the fires of hell, you know, you can feel somebody holding your hand. So I just, in return for just telling people what my journey was, I just received an astonishing amount of support and love from unlikely sources. A number of people said to me, you know, another number of people shared their journey with me as well and shared what they were going through. And I think that's part of what Mindy was talking about. You know, this is a silent, indiscriminate killer that nobody seems to know enough about. So it's up to us to be advocates and tell people, I think, you know, if we're comfortable to do it, tell people the journey that we're on and what we're going through and what it's all about. It's no big deal. You know, cancer happens to, I think the NCI, you'll know this better than I, you know, their statistics say that 40% of people will receive a cancer diagnosis at some time in their life. 40% of people. Is that about right? So, you know, there's a pretty good chance that you know, a lot of people are going to get this. And so you've got to sort of downsize this, sort of say, it's no big deal. It's, you know, if you can say, it's just cancer. That's all it is. And it's going to, and you know, so much about cancer is living with it, not dying from it. You know, so we're here living with cancer or living with people that are living with cancer, and every day we get up and we do what we do. So what did I want to tell you? Here was, I say to people, the attitude is, people ask me how I'm doing, I say, honestly, I don't know if I'm going to live 30 weeks or 30 years, but by the way, nor do you. You know, and it's almost like at least this feels better, again, without getting too dark. This feels a whole lot better than a sudden, unexpected death. At least we got time to plan stuff. you know, and just delay that day when it comes. You know, our job is to stick around for as long as we can because these guys will come up with something better next. So hang in there for 5 years and then something else will come along. Then another 5 years and so on and so on. You're all survivors. Some of you have survived a whole lot longer than I have. Some of you at the start of your journey, but this is not a death sentence. You know, this is absolutely 100% survivable. So one of the things I learned is the things you know, no matter how scary they are, they're less scary than the unknowns. And those unknowns are the things that trip you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Always 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning you start thinking about, I don't know what's happening. So, you know, what I tried to do is just find out more. I tried to find out what's happening. What could the options be? So, you know, don't be passive. You know, just find out what you can, because honestly, the unknowns are the things that scare you. And since you know something, then you can start to sort of quantify it and get your hands around it and work out how to deal with it. Another thing I learned is the place where you fight this is between your ears. It's in here. And I think that you know, I'm just not very strong and I'm not very brave. You know, if I hear somebody, I'm famous for, if I think there's somebody breaking into the house, I make my wife go downstairs and look for it. I've done that. She reminds me of that constantly. Do you remember that time you said, so I'm not a brave person and I'm not a strong person, but I just didn't see there was any alternative other than fighting. You've got to stand toe-to-toe with this thing because you're going to be, you know, you'll never not have this. I think that's the thing, you'll never not have cancer now. You know, you'll never be able to forget the fact that this has happened to you. So you better just become as comfortable as you can with this thing, because this is going to be with you now. And just, you know, find a way to not let it define you. You know, and sort of just humanise this thing. I gave my cancer a name. My cancer was called Nigel. That was his name, because I think Nigel is kind of a, you know, I've got any Nigels in the room? What a relief. God, I could have put my foot in it then. So my cancer was called Nigel. And I think, you know, the fact that you're in this room or listening out there in the webosphere means that you've already started the journey of standing toe-to-toe with this. You know, you're not turning your back on it. You're saying, we own this fight. You know, and you've got to say, and we refuse to lose. We will stand up to this thing and we refuse to take a single step backwards. Right? We will beat this. We will beat this thing, or at least, you know, we'll spend as long time as we possibly can, you know, in this fight. I think, you know, the word I would use is, and I remember thinking this at the time, when they told me that I had cancer, it was just absurd. You know, just an absurdity. And I think, you know, cancer is absurd. It's absurd that we've got it. And I think the only, you know, in my case, the only thing I could do with sort of, you know, when something's absurd is find a way of laughing at it. You know, just don't give up hope. Just, it's not a of course it's not a laughable situation, but just, you know, I tell people, Steve Yang said to me once, I said, I'm feeling a bit down, what should I do? He said, well, go watch a DVD, he said, but in your case, probably, you know, not a box set, because you might not have that long. So, don't buy any green bananas was the other piece of advice he gave me. So, I'm paraphrasing. I've said it before, trust your medical team. The people at Hopkins, I have no doubt, these people are absolutely the best in the world. And we are fortunate, we're lucky, we're blessed to have these guys looking after us, because, you know, that 18%, that doesn't apply to people that get treated by these guys at Hopkins. So trust your medical team and, you know, control the things you can control. There's a whole lot of things you can't control. You know, you can't. I always felt much happier when I was actually being treated, to be honest, because at least then we were fighting, we were doing something. Every radiation session, every chemo session, every time they went and had a look, we were on the offensive, we were moving forward, we were trying to do something about this cancer. And I found the hardest times was when I wasn't being treated. You know, or that period between the scans when you're sort of saying, I mean, a week before, I don't think about this thing for most of the time, and then a week before a scan, I'm a basket case. You know, I have a pain in my elbow, so, well, that's obviously cancer at the elbow, isn't it? That's what I've got now. But, you know, so control. I have a friend that he's also got prostate cancer. He hates tomato juice. But every morning he makes himself drink a glass of tomato juice because That's his way. I'm fighting this cancer today because I'm having this tomato juice. So find the things that sort of convince you that you're moving forward. If that's walking your steps or going to the gym or walking the dog or whatever it might be, you know. Control the controllable. Stay on the offensive. I think things are never as bad as you think they are. And conversely, things are probably never as good as you think they are either. So stay in the middle, stay balanced, you know. And my attitude was, what I try to do is stay in the middle, never too high, never too low, never too optimistic, never too pessimistic. And I think the most difficult times have been when I've sort of tricked myself into thinking that I'd never hear from this cancer again. You know, tricked myself into saying, that's it, I'm done, you're over cancer, you're in the rearview mirror. And then you get this thing from Dr. Vong says, I want to go in and have another go. And so it'd be interesting to hear from the medics in the room. You know, I'm not comfortable with this word remission, when they say you're in remission, because I think remission traps you into thinking that that's it. So for me, a much more useful phrase is, there's no current sign of the disease, because it just keeps you attentive, keeps you focused on the fact that, you know, you've got this and you'll always have it. And honestly, in my case, it doesn't make me sad or unhappy. It just makes me sort of focused on it makes me focus on the fact that I've got this cancer and yet my life is great. You know, I'm amazed at how few long-term consequences there are of being sliced and diced, of losing half an esophagus, you know, having a stomach up here. You know, actually, there's nothing I can't eat. There's nothing I can't do. You know, I have had cancer. There's no current sign of the disease, but life is great. So, you know, I'll take that, and I'll take every day of that I can. Dumping syndrome. That's a doozy. So in my case, dumping syndrome, actually, the way my dumping syndrome sort of unveils itself is, I've got this little stomach, right, and I eat the wrong kind of stuff or too much, and then my pancreas injects an adult-sized portion of insulin into this child's stomach, and I go hypoglycemic, and I fall over, and I've lost count of the number of times I've woken up in the back of an ambulance wondering what all the fuss is about, actually. It's like a reverse diabetic coma in some ways. But so you know, I've had to, and I was saying to Jeff during the break, you know, I spent 56 years eating 3 big meals a day as quickly as I could to leave time for snacks in between. I just can't do that now. You know, people are embarrassed to take me to a restaurant because I always leave 3/4 of the food on the plate and have to ask for a box to take it home. So, you know, my eating habits have changed dramatically. You know, now it's like, I don't know, I notice people keep going up to the cakes and the muffins. You know, just like me, I need to eat sort of like 8 times a day, but then I'll have 2 bites and then I won't be hungry anymore. But again, I'll take it. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of fun being a permanent grazer rather than sitting down for big meals 3 times a day. Another thing that I realise is, and tell me if this resonates, I think it's much harder for those those around us and those that love us. It's much harder for them to deal with than it is for ourselves. And I think that's because, you know, the people that love us watch us every day and they say, is he normal today? Or is she feeling all right? Or how does he look? Or what's going on? And we know exactly how we feel. And I think, you know, living with cancer means you're vigilant and you sort of say, you know exactly what's going on. You know how you feel. And other people guess. You know, we can just become absolutely single-minded in facing into what we've got and just, you know, understanding it and learning with it. And it's much, much harder for the people that don't have it and watch us every day. It's much harder for them to sort of work out what's happening. So, you know, be kind to those that are around you. Be kind to your carers. Have a plan B, just in case. And I think that, you know, I think it's very easy, it's very common to sort of ask yourself, why me? Why did this happen to me? And I think, you know, that's actually the wrong question. The right question is, why not me? You know, it can happen to everybody. You know, cancer is a nasty, indiscriminate killer, and it doesn't care who it attacks and who it comes from. It just doesn't care. It's nothing personal. It's just, you've got it. And I think that, you know, I mean, bad things happen to good people. And unfortunately, good things happen to bad people as well. That's even worse. But, you know, don't, you know, you've got cancer, don't take it personally. I mean, you know, I'm not the kind of... I've come to realise in my journey that, you know, things don't necessarily happen for a reason. You know, there is no why me, it's why not me, it's got to happen to somebody. You know, as I said, 40% of people in this world will be told at one stage in their lives that they got cancer. You know, and they are also living with cancer, not dying from it, right? Living with cancer and not dying from it. I think that, you know, there will be dark moments. You know, John Lennon, fellow Brit, you know, he famously said, life is what happens to people. Life is what happens to people when they're busy making their plans. You know, we didn't choose this path. We didn't choose, you know, to be given this. We didn't choose to live with people that have got this. But now we just got to get on and do what we need to do about it. And I think that, you know, there'll be times when, you know, you go to some pretty dark places and you find yourself reflecting on, you know, the sort of the sadder aspects of this. And I think, you know, what I would say is when you're in those moods or you're doing those things or you're looking through the old photographs or you're reaching for that second bottle of wine, just ask yourself, is this helping? If it's helping, fine, carry on and do it. But usually when I'm in those sort of, you know, unhappy moods, and I say to myself, is this helping? You say, no, this is not helping actually. This is doing the opposite of helping. So it just gives you an opportunity to check in with yourself and sort of say, you know, stay positive. I think the Marines have an expression which is, mind the good stuff, you know, go for the gold, look for the good in every day. And I was thinking that you know, post-cancer, you know, here's all the things I was going to do. I was going to take up yoga, I was going to meditate, I was going to go to church more often, I was going to give up alcohol completely, I was going to make sure I exercised, I was going to call my parents every day. And none of that happens, really. You know, it's not like you suddenly say, do you know what, now I'm a better person because I'm the same person I was before cancer, before my diagnosis. And I think my reflection would be all the problems and all the worries that you had before your cancer diagnosis, guess what? They're still there after your cancer diagnosis. So life still goes on. You know, it's not like, you know, my life was bad, I had cancer, my life is great now. You know, your life after your diagnosis is exactly the same as it was before. All those issues and all those things you worry about, they're still right there. So, you know, but in every day, something great happens. Go for the gold. Say, yeah, you know, that was a good day because I had a fantastic conversation with my neighbour, or we had a great meal, or we watched a good show on TV, or I had a good conversation with my kid, whatever it might be. And every day, something great happens. And so mine that gold. You know, go and get those golden nuggets out of every day. Stay positive. Stay optimistic. Because it significantly increases your chances. You know, I used to go and they love seeing me at Hopkins, and I realise it's only because I take them candy. It's, you know, they don't care about me, but I take them candy. And they say, oh, it's always so nice you being here. You know, you're always so positive and optimistic. And I say, isn't everybody? And they say, no, not everybody is. But if you are positive and optimistic, and if you are involved, and if you do, you know, come to this kind of session, or you're listening on the web, by definition, you know, you're positive and you're optimistic, and you're in this fight, and you're in this fight to win. I would say, you know, who's on your team? Because the importance of a support structure, you know, cannot be overstated. Who's on your team? Who's got your back? Who's calling you on the day of your scan? Who's checking in with you? You know, because surround yourself with this team is fantastic. Who's your team? Surround yourself with a team of people that are vested in your health. You know, tell your friends, raise awareness. I left it too long. You know, mine became stage 3. If I'd have understood what was happening even 6 months earlier, you know, my journey would have been easier, I'm sure. You know, tell your friends. I tell everybody I can. You know, mine was swallowing. I was just the weirdest stuff. So I say to people, you know, particularly, most of the people I know are around the same age as me with the same kind of lifestyle. So exactly the kind of person that this cancer comes for. So, do you have reflux? Do you have a sore throat? Are you having difficulty swallowing? Get it checked out. Go and see your doctor and tell him or her that you've heard about this thing called esophageal cancer. Because I think people just don't know. Everybody knows lung cancer and prostate cancer and breast cancer and these kind of stuff. People just don't know what esophageal cancer is. But, it's coming for us. And we've got to be vigilant and we've got to be on the front foot. One of the things that, towards the end of my journey, this cancer may kill me. It may be something else that comes along, But, what I'm determined not to say, I want to write my own obituary, and I refuse to have anybody write, he fought a long, courageous battle against cancer before cancer finally beat him, because cancer isn't going to beat me and it's not going to beat you. Every day when you go to bed, it's 1-0 to you. You've beaten cancer. The best cancer can hope for, because when you die, that cancer dies as well. So the very best result that cancer can have is a tie of having lost 438,000 days against you, whatever it might be. So cancer ain't going to kill us. We will wrestle this thing with everything that we've got. And every day's a win. This is not a death sentence. And I can see from you all already, nobody in here accepts that death sentence that when you were first told, you thought was a death sentence. But, these guys, I think we're all here to tell you that you've got this. You'll be all right.